17 new minions coming to Battlegrounds. Pirates, a brand new minion type. We've got a lot of cards to review in this video.
Hey, buddy, watch this.
Now, before we begin, just to lay out my qualifications, I don't normally stream and play Battlegrounds all that often, but I've been grinding a ton over the last week in preparation for this event. I knew it was coming. So I've climbed to over 9K. If you're somebody who's leaderboard player, a dedicated Battleground streamer, you may not gain a lot of insights from my analysis, but if you're somebody who's below 9K, as most of us will be, including myself until this week, then you might still have something to learn. But that said, anybody can still glean some valuable insights off these cards, whether you're 4K or 13K. You might be able to tell us something, so certainly feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. But for now, let's start off with some Tier 1 pirates. Like this one, Scallywag, a 2/1 pirate with a death rattle that summons you another small pirate that then attacks immediately. And that sets up one of two different sort of play angles for pirates. They have some attack synergy stuff and then a lot of economy manipulation as well. From a total stat standpoint, this looks a bit like a token minion like, say, Murloc Tidehunter, but notably, because this is a death rattle, you don't get that token minion that you can sell for the gold boon bonus. But this does still take some trades into things like 2/3s in the early game, which means it's probably fine to grab as a combat minion, just not especially helpful as a setup minion. I don't also think this minion scales very well for 1-drops, which many 1-drops, say Rabid Sauralisk right now, do really nicely. So although I think if you're really planning pirates, this minion could serve you in a pinch, I don't think this is necessarily going to be a core build around or a starting early game minion. There are probably better options for pirates and probably better combat options as well, just to get the game rolling. So our next tier 1 pirate here is Dexwabi, and this plays to the other side of pirates, the economy side of things. He's a 2/2 with a crazy battle cry. Reduce the cost of upgrading Bob's Tavern by 1. I think that's amazing on turn 1, because if you go into your turn 2, your 4 gold turn, you're going to have a 3 cost upgrade instead of 4, which basically gives you an extra roll on your tier 2 minions. That's kind of like a Nozdormu hero power, certainly a Bartendotron hero power seems like an obvious comparison. But getting that bonus roll on tier 2 minions can make sure that you're really successful at grabbing those high-powered tier 2 minions in the early game, which can make a big difference on your 5 and 6 gold turns to help you stabilize early. So I think that's fantastic. Now, this isn't a great combat minion. It's going to lose to the 2/3s of the world out there. It's going to lose to the Murloc Tidehunter token starts. But I think that's okay, because you're going to be able to swing so hard in the next couple turns, particularly your 5 and 6 gold turn. The Dexwabi just seems amazing now. I think this also certainly has applications in the early to mid game when you're just looking to supplement some stats on board, just get something going and reduce the cost of a tavern upgrade along the way. So essentially, if you're upgrading anyway, you can kind of buy this for 2 gold, just plop it down, get something, and that could make a small incremental difference to survivability or even winning a combat. So all in all, I think this minion's really neat. Plus, putting this to gold presumably will reduce the cost of the tavern by 2, which could be enormous as well if you're already got a couple of these laying around. So this seems like it's going to offer a lot of that economy acceleration, tier acceleration, which is going to be pretty fundamental to pirate build success. So moving on here, we have Arcane Cannon, a tier 2 2/2. It can't attack, which is really important, and it reads, after an adjacent minion attacks, deal 2 damage to an enemy minion. So we've got this kind of ping style effect, reminiscent of something like Soul Juggler, say, but only 2 damage instead of 3. Now, importantly, this is, if it lives, going to be able to get off multiple pings in a given round, because if you put this, say, even just on the far left, it's not going to attack to kill itself, which means all 6 minions to the right of it are going to become adjacent minions if they die on their trades. So the one to the right trades and dies. A new one moves into the right. It trades and dies. Now, if something lives, you can certainly deny that chain and stop reaping the upside of this, which is a problem, because you want minions to value trade in most cases. You want your minions surviving. That's a good sign. But if they don't, Arcane Cannon could help make up the difference. Now, of course, if it dies on defense, because it can still be attacked, then you're also going to break the chain. So for me, I'm having trouble envisioning this one. I think it's one you kind of have to play to get a feel for, but it has a couple problems. I think 2 damage is far less significant than 3 with something like a Soul Juggler. I also think just setting up the conditions for this and protecting it are going to be much more awkward. So I think it's going to be hard to control and hard to ensure that this damage goes off. So for me, Arcane Cannon, I think it's going to fall into that trap of like, man, this just doesn't really work all that well. But certainly if Pirates can attack enough, if you can play into that style successfully, then Arcane Cannon has a shot of like blowing up some boards. I just think more often than not, it won't end up doing that. Moving on here, a card we actually know, it's South Sea Captain, tier 2, 3/3. Your other pirates have +1/+1. So this is kind of like a persistent Spawn of N'Zoth buff, but one where you actually want your minion to stay alive instead of die, which is cool because I think you can tuck it back on the right side of your board. Now, of course, the downside is it only affects pirates. It does not affect everything like a Spawn of N'Zoth, which I think is a real check and problem for this card's power level, because you may not always have a lot of pirates in the early game where that 1/1 buff really matters. The great thing about Spawn of N'Zoth is when you've got that random set of Murlocs and mechs and junk minions that you kind of had to buy because they were your only good options, Spawn of N'Zoth still has an impact. South Sea Captain might only hit like 1 or 2 minions on your early game boards, and then by the time you get to the mid to late game and you start refining a pirate build, I can't imagine this is going to be strong enough to compete against minions you'd naturally want to replace it with. So in a pinch on the perfect board, like, yeah, this could be just fine, but in most cases, I think this will fall to the wayside. You'd probably just rather have a Spawn of N'Zoth in those instances. So rarely will South Sea Captain actually stand out, and I think in most cases, he might just fall a little bit short. But of course, keep in mind that he can synergize with repeating attacks, unlike Spawn of N'Zoth, where if you're spawning new 1/1 pirates, kind of like with our token minion there at the very beginning of the video, then he does apply that buff to multiple things over time. So that's one additional potential angle here. If we see enough cards that can support that style of play, perhaps he gains enough of an edge there. Otherwise, this minion feels a tad awkward. Moving on here, we've got the Monstrous Macaw, a tier 2 3/2 beast. He's so big, but he's only a 3/2. I don't understand. He's monstrous. This doesn't make sense to me. But he's got a crazy effect. After this attacks, trigger a random friendly minion's death rattle. So when he attacks, a death rattle goes off. Now, that could very easily be Spawn of N'Zoth. As we mentioned, this could be like a bonus Spawn of N'Zoth on your early game boards, because if you only have that one death rattle, you can guarantee that Monstrous Macaw is going to activate your Spawn of N'Zoth. It doesn't even have to die for it to work. You could have multiple Monstrous Macaws and chain off with a crazy Spawn of N'Zoth style synergy board, which would be nuts. Even if you don't, there are some other death rattles that could work really well with Monstrous Macaw. Just getting like a free 3/2 off of your random Kindly Grandmother, right? Like a bonus 3/2. Okay, sure, that's fine. This becomes distinctly better than Kindly Grandmother if you support it. Now, nobody wants to run Kindly Grandmother, but you get the idea. So all in all, this seems like a very powerful and flexible early game minion. If you have any kind of death rattle, it feels like putting this at the front of your fight could go a really long way towards power spiking your board in the early game. Even with like crazy strong mid to late game death rattles, right? Like get an 8/8 out of this because of a Mechano Bag. That seems kind of nuts, like getting a tier 4 minion for the commitment of a tier 2 minion from the early game, holding over that power level starts to scale potentially as well. So this minion looks really strong to me. I don't necessarily think it's a pirate only minion. In fact, it works really well in beast builds. It's just kind of pirate themed. Maybe more of a beast minion, maybe more of a general death rattle minion. It just seems good across the board. I really, really like this one. Moving on here to the Free Dealing Gambler, a tier 2 3/3 that sells for 3 gold. This is completely bonkers. So it's free. You just splash it on the board anytime you have that open space. You get that 3 gold investment back later in the game, which is kind of nuts, I think. It reminds me of the dragon you can buy, and you can kind of trade that gold for a future buff. It's that 3/4 that supplants your board for now, and then you get the upside later. I think this offers you even more upside at a slight decline in stat value, because that 3 gold on a future turn could be nuts, lining up different tavern upgrades. I haven't broken down all the specific math on when exactly the breakpoints for this are perfect, but you could imagine a handful of different ones. Or buying this to invest in the future goes a really, really long way, whether it's just, once you hit that tier 4, offering you a couple extra rolls to find a key tier 4 minion, just accelerating your upgrade into tier 4 or 5. This seems just really, really, really good to me, and certainly is key to, I think, what we're going to require out of Pirates, which is a very quick tier strategy and a real acceleration of their economy. This minion looks just perfect for that, and I think could be defining for Pirates and Battlegrounds. Now let's head over to the Bloodsail Cannoneer, a tier 3 4/2 pirate. Battlecry reads, give your other pirates +3 attack. So this is basically a Metal Tooth Leaper style minion, slightly varied stat line, a higher tier, but also a higher attack buff. And of course, we know high attack values in Battlegrounds just make sense that we like buffing things. So yeah, this feels like a great cycle minion you can put into a pirate build. If you have a lot of gold floating around in pirates in particular, because you've got all these different economy manipulations happening, minions like this become really relevant to help fill out those turns, help you spend that gold, and really help you power spike the attack values of your board. So I'm sure Bloodsail Cannoneer will be something that gets purchased a lot. It very rarely will ever stick on board, I'm sure, but cycling through this will feel great for pirate builds. It seems like a really solid minion. Moving on here to the Yo-Ho Ogre. It's a tier 3 2/8 pirate with taunt, and it reads, after this minion survives being attacked, attack immediately. So pretty wild strategy here. But again, if you're attacking multiple times and that reaps rewards with future cards we'll see in this video, then Yo-Ho Ogre, particularly if you get this early enough in the game, could survive 3 or 4 attacks, both like maybe 1 or 2 defensively and then 1 or 2 offensively on the return swing, and proc a lot of different attack synergies really quickly. If there's anything that helps it scale in stats when attacking, in particular, this could become a force. And then tripling this, keep in mind, it's going to be a 4/16 that you could probably triple fairly early in the game. And I think that 16 health in particular is something that could stick around for a long time, especially trading into things like token boards or beast starts. This could really help you try to snipe things like your opponent's soul jugglers or pack leaders, whatever kind of synergy minion they have over there. This could help you get extra attacks to kill those things a little bit quicker, or just kill the rat packs right in a row so they can't summon as wide of a token board. There's all kinds of benefits to having extra attacks beyond just the pirate synergy stuff. So all in all, this does seem like a pretty interesting minion. Just having a big taunt body too can be helpful as well. Now, it's another one of those I think I kind of have to see in practice to know how often it's going to get to attack at certain stages of the game. Maybe it just dies on the first attack always and it's sort of useless. But I think there is some upside and potential for a card like this one to do some neat things, particularly against certain kinds of compositions. Next up here is the Salty Looter, a 3/3 tier 3 pirate that reads, whenever you play a pirate, gain +1/+1. So we have a scaling minion here in the style of like Crowd Favorite or Rabid Sorlisk, where you can start to really build this thing up nicely. But it's specifically here for pirates, which I think is fine. If you're committing to pirates, you're going to be buying a lot of pirates anyway. And especially if you're buying pirates that are like free to play, you can buy it for 3 gold and sell it right back for 3 gold. There's going to be a lot of opportunities to chain multiple big time pirate purchase turns together. And I think scale this up pretty quickly and pretty aggressively. I think it has way more upside potentially than Rabid Sorlisk or Crowd Favorite style cards. The one downside, of course, is it's starting a little bit later in the game. It's harder to commit to something like this in the mid game because you might be sacrificing some stats now. But if pirates are really ramping things up, accelerating quickly, Salty Looter could follow suit and I think be a really nice big build around minion. Particularly in gold, it's going to scale even faster. So I think this actually makes a lot of sense for the way pirate playstyles, at least I'm envisioning them, when you're buying lots of stuff, spending lots of gold, chaining multiple pirates together. I think this guy would get pretty big and be a successful minion. Next up here, we have the Gold Grubber. I love this guy's art and name. He's a tier 4 pirate. He's only a 2/2, but at the end of your turn, gain +2/+2 for each friendly golden minion. So gold-based scaling here is pretty sweet. This reminds me of Razor Gore, as we've seen in Dragon builds, but you have to have golden minions specifically to make this guy go nuts. Now, normally I'd say that's way harder than just having dragons on board, but with pirates, I wonder if it will be. I think pirates, again, are going to be able to spend a lot of gold, which helps them find minions faster, helps them find triples. And you could play towards this being kind of like the cap of your build, like just buying a ton of early game minions, tripling them, having 4 or 5 triples on board. This guy's going to scale really, really quickly with that base +2/+2 for each. That's really big. If you triple this, it's going to be gaining +4/+4 for each and start scaling like crazy. So I do think this could be an interesting build around. I don't know if it's always going to work out just because you have to have the right kind of board state for it. But if you compare it to something like an Iron Sensei, right? That's a 2/2 that's adding 2/2 every turn. That's not a great minion by any means. It's not something we typically see, but it only takes 1 golden to make this on par with an Iron Sensei. If you have 2 or 3 goldens, this starts outscaling that like crazy, even starts meeting something like a Light Fang Enforcer really, really quickly. So all in all, I think this is one to definitely keep an eye on. It's going to depend kind of on how Pirates play, but I feel like there are going to be some games where Gold Grubber really helps define the winner here in a Pirate build. Moving on here to the South Sea Strong Arm, a tier 4 pirate. She's a 5/4 with Battlecry. Give a friendly pirate +1/+1 for each pirate you bought this turn. So basically, the Edwin Van Cleef hero power, but specific to pirates and on a minion instead of your hero power, which is intriguing. Again, I think you'll be able to buy a lot of pirates in a given turn, cycle through things pretty crazily. So this could easily be like a 3/3, a 4/4 buff. Keep in mind, she herself contributes to it, so she's always going to be a +1/+1 at a baseline if you just need that 5/4 minion in a pinch and a small buff. South Sea Strong Arm contributes, and she's also got, maybe some 4/4, 5/5 style turns in her as well, which is pretty cool. I think that means that this is certainly a viable mid-game buff card. We see a lot of buff cycling at tier 4 in particular. Compared to something like Vermin Sensei, this looks like it has a lot more potential upside, and pirates have a lot of gold to spend. So South Sea Strong Arm makes sense as a really solid minion you're going to be buying fairly often in pirate builds. Moving on here to Rip Snarl Captain, a tier 4 pirate. He's only a 3/4, but he reads, whenever another friendly pirate attacks, give it +2/+2. So here we see some pirate attack synergies coming into play. This is kind of like your pack leader style card for pirates, I think. Now, instead of when they're summoned getting buffed, this is specifically when they attack. So you can imagine this with our big Yoho Ogre previously. Each time that Yoho Ogre attacks, it's going to gain a +2/+2 buff. So if it's killing off 1/1s, like it could chain forever killing 1/1s, right? It's going to gain more damage or gain more health than it takes in damage. So there are some pretty cool synergy possibilities there. Even our like little token 1/1 from the very beginning of the video becomes a 3/3 when it attacks, which is a nice little upside. Now, of course, you do have to build a specific way, I think, for this to work well. +2/+2 by the time you're getting to tier 4 is meaningful, but it's not like crazy. But if you can get, 5, 6, 7, 8 attacks out of this, if you get up to 10, 12 attacks, you're looking at this minion being like worth 24/24 in stats, or maybe 16/16, maybe 8/8. When does it become worth it? I'd say maybe that 12/12 extra stat range becomes a really powerful minion. So that's 6 minions on board. If this lives long enough and everything attacks in the meantime, Rip Snarl Captain's pretty nuts. It just depends on how pirates are played out, how quickly they kind of skip tier 4, maybe to push to tier 5, tier 6 style minions. I don't know exactly, but this minion certainly has potential for that attack synergy style play. So now let's take a look at tier 5. This is usually where things get really defining when it comes to minions and builds. This is Captain Hogar, a 6/6 pirate that reads, after you buy a pirate, gain 1 gold this turn only. And that's that economy we're talking about, right? If you get to tier 5, you start buying a lot of pirates, reselling your pirates. Keep in mind, say that gives you 3 gold when it's sold pirate. It's actually going to be a net gain of 1 gold that helps you trigger other pirate purchase cards. Things can really start going nuts where you can cycle through some big time high gold turns. You're going to need a lot of time to make this style of play work, but the economy bonus of something like Captain Hogar is completely bonkers. I don't even know what it's going to look like. It's probably going to be very high skill, but I think the potential is just off the charts for how big you can put together some crazy turns, some crazy buffs, some big upside. And the 6/6 body here is, nothing to scoff at. It's not exciting by any means, but it's enough where you don't feel terrible probably keeping this on board, especially if you've really accelerated to tier 5. And the upside that it provides, I think, is going to be enormous as long as you're fairly skilled at manipulating all your gold in a given turn. I'm nervous to play this, but it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. So I think Captain Hogar could be a very defining minion, setting up those final pushes for pirates where they're doing crazy buffs, crazy economy boosts. This card looks really good. Next up here, we have the Sea Breaker Goliath, a 6/7 with Wind Fury, and Overkill. Give your other pirates +2/+2. So if this snipes some small minions on its attacks, you can buff your board pretty substantially, maybe +4/+4 right off the bat. That's interesting in a way, but I do worry about this minion succeeding. First off, it doesn't have the sort of Zap Slywick targeting where it's going to hit small things that are much more likely to die, or snipe really valuable minions. Not that it needs to compare to Zap, but just basically this attack is going to run into big taunts half the time and not overkill at all. So any sort of big taunt, Divine Shield start is going to really deny the ability for this minion to overkill successfully if you put it at the beginning of the fight. Now, of course, you can move it later into the fight and hope that it snipes small leftover stuff in the middle to late portion of a game of a round. But of course, at that stage, there may not be as many pirates left to buff on your board because some things have already traded in and died. So you're also reducing the upside of Seabreaker Goliath there. Plus, of course, if it gets attacked, the overkill doesn't do anything at all. So I'm feeling a little awkward on where to put this, how it plays into things. Now, of course, it can activate attack triggers like we saw with our Rip Snarl Captain. This can gain some stats immediately each time it attacks off Wind Fury, which could help it take trades. So there are, I think, still some angles for this guy to see some success. But it feels more like one of those filler 5-drops than like the really build around 5-drops where it's like, okay, any build can kind of take this and maybe feel okay that they just got a big 6-7 with Wind Fury. They got a few pirates. Hey, that's a bonus. You toss it in, but it's not something that like really defines your pirate playstyle. Maybe I'm underestimating it a little. It feels like it's not going to line up all that well. If you have thoughts that this card's going to be amazing, explain to me why, explain how it's going to work, because I'd love to see the other side on this one. I am hopeful, just not convinced on Seabreaker Goliath. So moving on here, we have Nat Pagle, the Extreme Angler. It's also tier 5, 8/5 pirate. Overkill, summon a 0/2 treasure chest. And I talked to Blizz about this. The 0/2 treasure chest, as I was told, will summon you a random golden minion. Now, I guess that can be from any tier. So you might just get, like a golden Murloc Tidehunter, which is like a 4/2 and you don't care. Or maybe you get like a golden Ghast Coiler and it's completely insane and game winning. I don't love that kind of variance, but it seems possible based on what I was told about this card. Stay tuned for the official details. Now, that said, I think Nat Pagle struggles from the same problem as our previous overkill card. How often and how readily is this overkill actually going to activate? You certainly don't want to put this at the beginning of a fight. You may not have space to summon that 0/2 if your Nat Pagle is surviving, although it can activate overkill while dying, so that's not necessarily an issue, although with Hearthstone effects, maybe that still doesn't summon the minion. I don't know for sure. Regardless, 8 attack isn't enough to successfully and reliably activate that overkill in the late game. Now, that said, if pirates are accelerating really quickly up to tier 5, if they're ramping hard, getting to tier 5, buying this early, there might still be smaller minions on board for this to more successfully activate, which could really punish your opponents, help you kind of aggro out your lobbies. I guess the same could be said for the Seabreaker Goliath behind us. The previous card could do the same. Now, I don't know how reliably that's going to happen, though, or how consistent. Just because you accelerate to 5, play a gold, or accelerate to 4, play a golden, doesn't mean you're going to find one of these crazy pirates, but maybe they can help you really push a lobby when you do. So it seems like a really fun card. It seems super high variance. I don't know how consistent it's going to be, though, as a big payoff at tier 5. It feels like it's probably okay, but not amazing. So now on to tier 6 here, we've got the Tide Razor. It's a 6/4 with a Death Rattle, summon 3 random pirates. So speaking of Ghast Coiler, this is kind of our Ghast Coiler here for pirates, I think. Now, when it comes to 3 random pirates, I think there's some really bad ones, right? They're just like a lot of low-cost stuff, some just base stat line stuff. I don't think 3 random pirates is going to be particularly exciting. Now, we do have some like stuff that helps to refill the board, get more pirates out there, even talking about like our South Sea Captain, like having a refill is nice because future pirates benefit from the buff. That's probably not the best example. So there are some bonuses here to getting extra pirates that are attacking extra times. Like clearly that could start to scale, but I don't think this provides as much upside as say like chaining Death Rattles off of Ghast Coiler with Baron Rivendare, right? I don't think this builds to quite that big of a payoff as some of those previous tier 6 synergy cards might. That said, it is just a big pile of stats. Sometimes you might be happy to toss down. Now, it's not a pirate itself, notably, so it might lose some of the benefit on the upside, but I feel like board space, minion quality are both going to be big checks on the Tide Razor that do limit this card's power level. And then finally here, our last minion, it's Dread Admiral Eliza. Tier 6, 6/7 pirate. Whenever a friendly pirate attacks, give all friendly minions +1/+1. So here we have another big pirate attack bonus. If you played it with our previous card, you get those 3 pirates. They each attack, you're going to get +3/+3 buff across all of your minions. And this is kind of like that Rip Snarl Captain, but it just scales much faster. Now that's pretty cool, I gotta say. Like, that feels like it could be a big in-game buff. But the part about it that makes me really nervous is the fact that this isn't going to be persistent buffs. This is happening during combat. It's not going to scale during your non-combat phases. So those buffs are forgotten at the end of a fight. So you kind of have to have the fight roll your way. You have to have things go perfectly for these stats to matter. And they don't continue to scale. Now, of course, you can scale your minions otherwise, but Eliza isn't that sort of Calicos style card that helps you build out this ginormous board over the course of a tavern round. You've got to do it all during combat, which makes me a little bit nervous. Like, it just seems less reliable, less intimidating. Maybe at the end of the day, it's just enough and it's just big enough. In each fight, you get like 10-10, 12-12 in stats across your board. But it doesn't feel as big or substantial as the Calicos, the Mama Bear style plays to me, because it's just not persistent. It's not remembered. So I have some concerns about this one being a big enough payoff. But of course, if things happen early enough in the game, if you've pushed your tavern tiers really rapidly thanks to all your economy bonuses, this is going to be a really good minion. When other people are playing like tier 4 stuff, you're going to be playing Dread Admiral Eliza and just pushing them out of the lobby. You're going to be killing people with big time damage off cards like this tier 6 minion. So all in all, I'm still hopeful that some of these, what I would consider perhaps meager tier 6 minions, are really like tier 5 minions for everybody else, and your tier 5 minions are really like tier 4 minions for everybody else. So if power levels seem a little lower, it's okay because they're happening much faster. So there's not really comparing across tiers so much, as pirates are pushing you to those tiers faster, and these minions are just hitting much sooner than you might expect. That's my hope for cards like these. Otherwise, I feel like the cap on pirates is limited, and they might really succeed more in that like tier 4 economy and buff cycling stage than having these really big payoff minions. That said, it's really hard to envision this without playing it. I haven't played it early. I don't know. We're going to learn a lot about these cards. These are just my instincts and first takes. So that said, that wraps it up for this review. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think, how you think pirates are going to play, how these minions are going to work, if I miss any interesting applications or key breakpoints, or just something really insightful that you've got. Please share that in the comments below. I'm learning just as much as you guys are, and everybody has some valid takes on these cards. So let's hear what you have to say in the comments below. Stay tuned for this update hitting very, very soon for Battlegrounds. I'll be playing it on stream. There will be some videos coming. We're not moving to Battlegrounds full time, but we're certainly going to enjoy the new content while we can. That said, thank you so very much for watching, and until next time, game on.
Step aside. Be purged!